Hello. How are we tonight? Been one of them busy days. I've only just sat down, so excuse me having a cigarette before we. Well, I will still start. So tonight's one is about Milton Tower in Keith. I can't remember who suggested it, but very interesting. Very, very interesting. I haven't got this in a timeline because I've actually covered two topics in one live. Because one kind of led to the other, if you know what I mean. So, Milton Tower in Keith is where we're starting. Of course, Milton, like any other place that's got the word town on the end, has had multiple spellings. The most common one is Milton, which of course now they've just taken the U out. It's a scheduled monument. It became a scheduled monument in 1933. Now we're going all the way back to the 1400s. In 1480, it was built by George Ogilvy of Milton, who was a royalist. In 1601, it was repaired by Margaret Ogilvy of Milton, and it was the home of the Ogilvys for 200 years. In 1707, this is just the brief overview first, okay? 1707, it passed by marriage into the Jacobite Oliphant family. Now, they were royalists, and then it switched into the Jacobite family. Oliphants. With an O, not an E. It's not elephants, it's oliphants. The Oliphant family basically completely ignored the building and let it start to fall apart. By 1715, bits and pieces were starting to fall off already. And in 1829, the building was completely abandoned and was used as a quarry, like a lot of our older buildings all over the country. When the building falls out of use, they quite often go and nick the stone to use for other buildings. So, what survives now? There's only a bit of the north side that survives, but when you look on the south wall, apparently there's some sticky bits still on the south wall. I've never even seen the building in my life, apart from in photos online over the last couple of days. But there are a couple of wee sticky out bits which would have been the supports for the floor for extending the building off out to the south on the first floor. Being that it's the first floor, it's more than likely the hall, presumably the Great Hall. The only thing that's left of the Great Hall now is the fireplace, which has a concrete lintel. So somebody's obviously nicked the original lintel, which in the 1400s, original lintels on fireplaces quite often had the family crest on it. So somebody's presumably nicked it because the family crest was on it. Sorry, I've got something stuck in my hair and it's annoying me. It's probably paint from earlier. I was painting when the sun was out this morning. Next to the big fireplace, there's one of the ombres, and it's a sizable one. It's the size of a door frame. So as you're looking at the fireplace with a concrete lintel, on the right-hand side, there appears to be a doorway that's not a doorway. That's the ombre, that's the cupboard. The one on the left, as you're looking at the fireplace, that you can see has been sealed up more recently, that was the entrance into the next room from the Great Hall. That's on the west side. There's also a square-headed window on the second floor too, and a small garret window with a slit window. Oh look, I just got a notification to tell me I'm on live. I hadn't noticed Facebook, but thank you for letting me know. At least I know it's actually working. The building itself, the tower, is twin-gabled. The ground floor has a vaulted ceiling. Remember we said that was the big stone arches? So it's got a big stone arch ceiling on the ground floor. which again probably would have been storage more than anything else. There's an entrance on the west wall of the ground floor, which the fancy name for it is a segmental headed entrance. Now, all that means is it's an arched doorway where the arch is less than 180 degrees. That's all it means. Nothing fancy at all. The walls are intact, 100% intact to roof level at the moment. Well, the ones that exist still are completely intact. The walls are basically rubble walls with ashlar dressings. If you look closely at the finished stonework and the fancy pieces that you can see around corners and doorways usually, you'll actually see tool marks from the men who carved the stone, because you can see them in some of the photos online. The building is 7.15 metres from east to west, and from north to south is 6.4 metres. The walls are a metre thick all the way up, so it is still a substantial building. They've put down on the scheduling that it's of national importance. National importance, because it's a good example of defensive domestic structure from the 1400s. It's also the oldest building in Keith that still stands. Now, some of the folk that were there. You've got John Ogilvie from Milton, who was slain at the Battle of Afford in 1645. Then we have the one who's referred to on the sign on the building as Blessed John Ogilvie, Jesuit priest, martyred at Glasgow Cross in 1615. The Ogilvies took over the land that the tower stands on after the Reformation, because before the Reformation, the landlord for that particular stretch would have been Kinloss Abbey. So everybody in Keith would have been paying rent to Kinloss Abbey one way or the other. But after the Reformation, the Ogilvies became the feuars, which is a posh word for landlords, for Keith, and a lot more than Keith, not just Keith. They became the feuars for the district. It was, there we go. This is where we switch from the building, because there's not really a lot about the building. The Blessed John Ogilvie, Jesuit priest, his mum was Agnes Elphinstone, and she had 2 Jesuit brothers. She died when he was only 3. When the Blessed John was only 3 years old, his mum died. His dad remarried a lady by the name of Mary Douglas. Yes, I'm going through my scribbled notes that I did today. He remarried a Mary Douglas. At the age of 13, Blessed John, or Saint John as I'll call him from here on in, was sent off to Europe for his education. He is Scotland's only saint that has become a saint after the Reformation. All the other Scottish saints, not that there's that many of them, the other Scottish saints were saints before the Reformation. So he's the only one post-Reformation. He was canonised in 1976 by the Pope Paul VI. I'll tell you a wee bit more about that. Very good chance because of the names. Very good chance, Scott. Yeah, I think so. Now, St. John himself was born in 1579. He was brought up Protestant, but at the age of 13 sent off to Europe for education. He was educated in numerous different Catholic schools, and eventually, at 17, enrolled with the Jesuits, which, those of you that aren't good with the whole religion thing, even I used to think it was a slightly separate order from the Catholics, but they're basically one and the same. It's just a different level. It's like the end level boss from Catholics to go into Jesuit. His dad was Walter Ogilvie. St. John was the oldest son. As I say, brought up Protestant, well, Calvinist to be precise. And Walter also owned Drumnakeith in Banffshire. Now, I've never heard of that place before, but then I've always been round Elgin way, so I don't know that much about Banffshire or Aberdeenshire, to be honest. With some of the schools that he went to, we have him being educated by the Benedictines of Regensburg in Germany. Then we have, when I find the next page, then we have the Jesuits of Olmutz, which is now in the Czech Republic. In 1596, at the age of 17, he was enrolled into the Catholic Church, into the Jesuits of the Catholic Church, at Leuven in Belgium. He served in Rouen in Normandy. I'm trying to make sense of my own notes here. Served in Rouen in Normandy, and from the very day he was in with the Jesuits, he was requesting, I want to go back to Scotland, I want to go back to Scotland. But with the Reformation in 1560, everything to do with Catholicism was illegal. It was all banned in Scotland from 1560. So they didn't want to send him there. But he kept asking, kept asking, kept asking. Eventually, he was fully ordained as a Jesuit priest in Paris in 1610. He smuggled himself back into Scotland, disguised as a horse trader by the name of John Watson. Now, some records say soldier, but the majority of them say horse trader, including the saints list from the Vatican says horse trader. That one also says he was with 2 other priests, but there's no mention of them after getting back to Scotland. So in 1613, he's back in Scotland, preaching in secret, holding private masses in people's houses, which was completely illegal. He didn't make it a full year. By October 1614, he'd been betrayed by one of the borough traders from Glasgow, who was pretending to be a Catholic, invited him to his house to hold service, and when he got there, they were all waiting for him and arrested him. He was jailed at Paisley and Edinburgh. 2 months in Paisley and 3 months in Edinburgh. Because he refused to confess the names of the people who'd helped him, they tortured him. Nothing like you would imagine from some medieval stuff, but sleep deprivation. He was kept awake for 8 days and 9 nights, and he still didn't give anybody's name. So then they're like, okay, you have to admit to King James VI and First, i.e. Mary Queen of Scots' idiotic son, you have to admit that he outranks the Pope. in all spiritual matters? Well, of course, he says no. He's a Jesuit priest. As far as he's concerned, the Pope overrules everybody. The only one who overrules the Pope is God. So he stuck to this. They put him on trial 3 times, and he still didn't change his story. He never gave anybody up. He never dobbed anybody in, and he stuck to his faith. In the finish up, during his last trial, probably the speech that made it his last trial, he accused the king of impersonating God and said he would treat the king with the same respect as he would an old hat, because the king is not the ruler in spiritual matters. The Pope and then God are the rulers in spiritual matters. Well, that got him found guilty of treason for speaking against the king. See, Mary Queen of Scots' loon James was an egotistical twit is the politest way I can describe him. So he's found guilty of treason, and then on the 10th of March 1615, they paraded him up and down the centre of Glasgow and eventually led him to the Market Cross in Glasgow, where he was hanged. His last words, you know how when you're being executed, they're like, any last words? Yeah, his last words. If there be here any hidden Catholics, let them pray for me. But the prayers of heretics I will not have. Which you can imagine caused quite an uproar in the crowd. As he finished saying that, he was pushed off the steps, because it wasn't a trapdoor one, it was a steps one, pushed off of the steps to hang. But he had his rosary hidden in his clothing. As he was pushed off to be hung, he threw his rosary into the crowd, and legend says one of his enemies caught the rosary, and then, within a matter of days, became a devout Catholic for the rest of his life. So there's one considered miracle. But it's legend says, oh, shut up, phone. It's legend says, so I can't say that's 100% true. After his execution, all of his followers were jailed and given really heavy fines, but none of them were killed. He was the only Scottish martyr of the Reformation and Counter-Reformation. I have some other bits down here. He was buried outside the city walls of Glasgow in an unmarked grave. In 1629, oh, wait a minute. I missed a bit. Never mind, I've got it, I'll further up. In 1629, there was a petition raised to have him raised to a saint. But it wasn't taken seriously by Rome. In 1929, he was beatified, which basically means the Catholic Church is saying, yeah, he's gotten to heaven, people have prayed to him, and he's been shown to help. They're not saying he's performed a miracle, they're just saying he's in heaven and he's available to talk to when you're doing your prayers. That's what beatified means. That was the 22nd of December 1929. Then we skip to 1967, when a man down south called John Fagan from Easter House, if I remember right, was suffering alleged end-stage stomach cancer. And he prayed to John Ogilvie to help him, figuring Easter House is the only area named after John Ogilvie. Quite how that becomes named after him, I really don't know, but that's what it said in the book. But he prayed to him, and over the following few weeks had a miraculous recovery, and allegedly cancer-free within 2 months of praying to John Ogilvie. This was all written out and sent to the Vatican as evidence of a miracle. The Vatican investigated for a very long time. And in 1976, on the 17th of October, they held a ceremony to canonise John Ogilvie. Now, because he was a Scot, the Tartan Army went to the ceremony. Nothing to do with football. 4,000 Scottish people went to the ceremony in Rome. Well, probably Vatican City, to be honest. But 4,000 Scottish people went to the ceremony to see John Ogilvie canonised as an honest-to-goodness saint. His feast day is already past, the 10th of March. In 1980, there was a church opened in dedication to him in Corby, of all places, down south. And it's the Church of St. John Ogilvie. There are 3 other churches in his name in Alness, Invergordon, and Tain. He is Scotland's only post-Reformation saint. And I never, ever, ever thought I would find a saint who was actually born up here. I'm shocked. And I'm also shocked that that took me 3 hours to find all that out, and it's only taken me 22 minutes to flame and recite it. But yeah, I found lots and lots of, well, what appeared to be lots and lots of information on John. But when you go through them all, they were all just saying the same thing over and over and over again. But it took me nearly 4 hours to get all that. And only 22 minutes to tell you about it. Which is a bit of a waste, but never mind. So what do we think about that then, folks? A saint for Keith? It's pretty cool, actually, I think. Pretty cool. That sun's blinding me. It's nice to see it, but... yeah, there's a lot of Scots in Corby. Yeah. Patron saint of... oh, what's he the patron saint of? I couldn't find what he's the patron of. Let me have a look. That's just the same stuff I came up with before. He's the patron saint of the church in Corby. Let's have a look. I found a page that might have something. Aha! Somebody's actually asked that same question on a Catholic forum. And the 3 replies are, it's my understanding not all saints become patron saints. Well, that's true. And the rest is them saying that they've just enrolled back into the church. Oh, so this is like ministers and novices on this. There are no patronages of St. John Ogilvie in the general sense, such as Holy Michael the Archangel being patron of the paramedics, St. Thomas Aquinas being patron of students, and St. Therese being patron of missionaries. St. John's patronages cover numerous parishes throughout Scotland and the world. This is similar to a town or city's patron saint. For instance, St. Mungo, a predecessor of St. John Ogilvie, is the patron saint of Glasgow. I know he's the patron saint of Easter House, which is actually named after him. I don't know how that translates to being named after him, but it's the only patronage that I know of. One of the other ministers has commented, he can become your very own special patron if you ask him. Which is that's a very, very religious answer. But he's not the patron saint of anything in particular. Easter House. That's about it. Yeah, exactly, Sarah. I was like, what? Say that again? And the very fact, there's the religious portraits where they all look very pious and blah, 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 blah. But then there's another portrait which is listed as being an actual likeness of him, not just as the church wanted to see him. He was reasonably good looking and pretty young too. It's unusual to find a painting or a sketch of a saint that's not somebody that's pushing 70. That was the one that surprised me most, because most of them, you see, you've got your monk hairdo, or there's no hair and a big Shakespeare beard. This is a young guy in his 30s or 40s, which isn't young to some of you, I know, but it's young for a saint, trust me. Just look at Mother Teresa. She wasn't exactly a young wifey, you know. So, but he appears to be the patron saint of Easter House simply because it was named after him. But other than that, it just seems to be churches and schools. There's like 15 different schools throughout the UK and Europe, and even one in Australia, that are St. John Ogilvie. So his name is out there. It's just we weren't aware of it because, well, most of us on the page aren't Catholics. Him upstairs kens I have a pointy hat and a broomstick in the house. I might work in a Catholic building, but I'm nae. I would have been one of the ones that they were chasing round the place killing. But yeah. And of course, with the house switching from from a royalist family into a Jacobite family, that's basically politics is why it got trashed. Because even though it passed into their possession, they didn't want to have anything to do with it because it was a royalist house. But it's the oldest building in Keith. It's of national importance because of its age and because of it's basically a fortified house. If you were to barricade yourself into your house, that'd be a fortified house as well. But that's just a fortified house. That also happens to be the oldest building in Keith. And the saint was born in that building. So you never know what you're going to uncover when you start digging about round information that's available on buildings. I'm just glad that there's so much online, although, yeah, I could have been doing with quite a bit more on this one, because it's only given me 20 minutes, even including him as well as the building. So from the sound of it, and looking at the photos online, it's kind of like, you know the wee Bishop's House that's over the road for Elgin Cathedral? It's kind of the same idea, because the bit that the kids use as a stage when they're doing their little plays and their mess-abouts would have been the bit that sticks out where that fireplace with the concrete lintel is on the Keith building. So you've got the main tower, but all the bits running off of it. So it would have, by the look of it, it would have been an L-shaped building like that one. But the crossbars fell off, so there's just the tower now. Well, fell off. It's probably in different buildings all around the place. If you notice, if you're local to it and you notice bits of stonework with patterns on them, make a wee mental note of the patterns. Exactly, Scott. You and me both. But if you see any patterns on the building, make a wee mental note of them and see if you can see any other buildings in Keith that have the same patterns copied. Because that might help you track down some of the stone, because it was used as a quarry. I'm just glad they didn't take the whole thing. But yeah, because I had never heard of the building until it was raised as a suggestion. And the first thing I thought of, as soon as I was told Milton Tower, the first thing I thought of was whiskey, agriculture, traders, because, yeah, okay, it's the A96 nowadays, or whatever it is as it runs through Keith, but there was still the main road there. There's a reason our main roads through Scotland are a bit higgledy-piggledy, and that reason was the Great Caledonian Forest, which started basically a half-hour ride out of Edinburgh town centre, and if you head north through that woodies, by the time you come out the other side of the woods, you're half an hour away from forest. So the main roads are so higgledy-piggledy, and like Inverness to Glasgow, or round the coast, that's the way they always would have been, because that big chunk in the middle, apart from the cairngorms, the rest was woodland, and it wasn't considered safe to cross through the woodland. Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's like, Keith, a saint? Really? I'm pretty sure he's not Scotland's only saint. There's a thing now. Out of nosiness. Saints born in Scotland. Let's just see what comes up. No, St Andrew the Apostle was not born in Scotland. He is our patron saint, though, but he was not born in Scotland. She was born in Hungary. Aha! 5 lesser known Scottish saints. That'll be the link we need. It's a newspaper article. Yes, I accept. St Donnan of Egg A Gaelic priest, most likely born in Ireland. Well, that puts him off, because we're looking for ones that were born in Scotland. They've got some sizable chunks of info. Saint Kessig. Now there's a familiar name. Born into Irish royalty in Tipperary, another Irishman. Saint Oda. A holy woman synonymous with the Netherlands rather than in her homeland. Ooh, where are we? She was born blind. Doesn't tell you where she was born, but it sounds like she was born here. Sent on a pilgrimage to Liege to visit the relics of St. Lambert of Maastricht. In the the German ones, nae the Aberdeen Maastricht. Maastricht. In the hopes of curing her blindness. While praying at St. Lambert's grave, her sight was restored, and Oda made her way back to Scotland, vowing to dedicate her life to God as a nun. So there's a female saint born in Scotland. Her father wanted her to marry and had selected a husband for her, but because of her vow, she ran away, travelling first to Rome and then to Monte Gargano in Italy. She then travelled onwards to the Netherlands and Belgium, praying in several villages but finding herself constantly disrupted by magpies. Attempting to escape the birds, Oda was instead led by the magpies to a small settlement in a forest called Rode, R-O-D-E, where the villagers built a hut for her. Legend claims that Oda planted some bushes to protect the hut from the elements, and within a day the bushes had grown into a thick hedge. Her father, having been made aware of his daughter's location by her use of coins from her homeland, Scottish coins, found the hut and attempted to approach it, only to be repeatedly driven back by magpies. Is it just me, or does this sound like Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty or the tower being surrounded by vines sort of thing? Even Rapunzel. He eventually gave up and returned to Scotland without Oda. She settled there as a hermit and eventually died in 726 AD. Many pilgrims began travelling to her hut, calling the place St. Oda's Road, which means St. Oda's Place in the Woods. This name evolved to become St. Odin Road in the modern-day Netherlands. The flag of St. Odin Road is a blue and white saltire, much the same as the flag of Scotland, with a small golden castle depicted on the left-hand side. Oda's feast day is October the 23rd, and she's portrayed in a long blue gown carrying a staff or a book with a magpie on her hand and a crown underfoot to signify her rejection of her father's kingdom. Oh, she was a bit of a rebel, but she's a saint. No, St. Regulus was born in Greece. Saint Serf. Now that one I have heard. No, he's another foreigner. His dad was the king of Canaan. That's actually quite good if you're a Bible follower. To be a king of Canaan means you're related to King David. So, that's two Scottish saints we have. One male, one female. There's a Saint Fitane. Oh, what have you found, Barry? Absolutely, yes, there was bears. There were bears in the forests of Scotland and England up till the 1700s, and there were wolves up until the early 1800s, and just like in wee places in the middle of AY. Because by the 16 and 1700s, we had started traipsing through the woodies a bit more, and we'd scared the animals away. What did you find with the Saint from Taine, Barry? Because I don't want to spend all night reading to you off of Google. Let's see what you found. Because I know St John Ogilvie has a church in Taine. Taine, Alness and Invergordon, there's churches with his name on it. I hate the lag on this thing. It's supposed to only be a short lag, but it always feels like it's like 10 minutes. A saint from Taine. Let's have a look, see where... Oh, St Duthac! I forgot about that one. Of course, St Duthac's church. Duh! Born in Taine in about the year 1000. Educated in Ireland and went on to become a renowned preacher who attracted a considerable following. Sufficiently important for his death to be reported in the Annals of Ulster for the year 1065. Tales of miracles soon grew up around the memory of Duthac. One story related how as a boy he'd been sent to collect hot coals from the local smithy. The smith simply placed them in Duthac's lap, whereupon the boy carried them to his master without ill effect. That's hardy. That's hardy. Ooh. See, now I want to look up Gaelic for wolf. MacTire. Well, that gets rid of that theory then. Because I was thinking it might be bin. Thinking Gaelic-wise, Colbin. The Killing on the Hill. The Cull on the hill. Wolves do tend to retreat to the hills. So, MacTire is one that's given as Gaelic for wolf, or how is it pronouncing it? Let's have a listen. Wolf. Oh, you're not pronouncing the Gaelic? Huh? Okay. We have MacTire, it's spelled. I don't know how I'm supposed to say it. And then there's another one that's Buralo. And the other one is Baba. I don't want Irish though. I want Scots Gaelic, not Irish. Gaelic's not on there, it's only given the Irish. Of course it is, because it's Google Translate. But there's the three different words that come up when you ask for Gaelic translation of wolf. Just out of nosiness. Because I was thinking perhaps that was where Culbin got its name. Or its modern name. So... So why don't we fill the last 15 minutes with Ask Anything You Want? So there's 3 Scottish saints. We've got 2 guys and a girl. I just thought, I knew the story about the girl not accepting the crown. Random kiddie story. Disney's Brave. She didn't want to accept the crown. She didn't want to accept the wedding. Is there anybody there? Have you all run away and abandoned me? I'll cry. I won't really. Not unless I stub my toe. Have we thought of any other places we want to add to the list? I'm adding Joseph Merrick to the list. I haven't put any dates in for May, because I'm hoping we're not going to be on lockdown in May, but we'll wait and see what happens on the 17th, because the 17th is when they could potentially change the rules on the lockdown stuff. So I'll wait and see what happens on the 17th before I start booking in for May, but Joseph Merrick has definitely been added to the list of things to do on here. So... there is, the original Findhorn is under there. The original Findhorn's under there. Buried over the course of 3 or 4 days. So... a bit like, it's a bit like Skara Brae, really. Skara Brae took 2 or 3 days to be buried by the storm, but that's right on the water's edge, and it's the North Sea. It's not a protected bay. Findhorn Village, yeah, 3 or 4 days to disappear under the sand. That's why you're not supposed to eat any shellfish from Culbin, because they reckon it's going to be tainted. But the age of the buildings and the houses and stuff that would have been under there wouldn't really be anything in there to taint it that's not already in the natural environment, except for the fact that it all got buried in sand and disappeared and sunk. My uncle used to tell me when we were wee, he used to tell me there was a big beastie that hid in the sand dunes, and if you were bad, your house would get sucked down into the sand. And that one Hogmanay, the folk of Findhorn hadn't got back to their houses by the 5th of January, so the beastie sucked the whole village down under the sand. I thought it was all garbage till I did a bit of research and found out, yeah, actually the Findhorn that's there is either the second one or the third one, the one that we can visit nowadays, or we will eventually be allowed to visit when we're allowed to come out and play. So, sorry about yesterday. I was cutting a tree up with loppers, and I got to the point by supper time that I couldn't move anything above the elbows. And it was like, you know, the old manual loppers for cutting a tree. And it's all this stuff all day. It still hurts to do it now. But by last night it was like, oh, this is killing me. Can't do it. So, but never mind. Is there only you in tonight, Scott? Let's bring it up on my page. No, there's not just you, because Naomi commented and so did Barry and Sarah and Donna. The Green Iron Wife. Yeah. The Green Iron Wife apparently lives off the back of Houtman Pier. Pretty much, if you know Houtman Harbour, she's supposed to emerge from underneath Coffin Rock. That's what we called it when I was wee. Coffin Rock. There's a big flat rock just off the back of the harbour that you can't see unless the water's really, really low. But they all said to us that it's called Coffin Rock because if you jump off of the outside of the harbour, you're going to hit it, and the next thing you see is your coffin, which is why you have to jump on the inside of the harbour. But it's what I was taught as a kid, so how much of it's right? So, you know. It's always bits and pieces, but yeah, she's supposed to emerge from Coffin Rock and come round and grab any kids that aren't being looked after, that are swimming in the open water, or who are loitering around the beach on their own. Basically, as you look at Hopeman, the East Beach, you've got the bit immediately beside the harbour, Finley's Bay, and then you've got the big bit of the beach with Daisy Rock at the far end. That big beach, in the middle you've got a rock, and it forms a crescent with the way the sand has gone over the rock, and that crescent holds the water, so it's like a mini swimming pool. I'm saying mini, it's about 30 foot long. It's about 30, 40 foot long, and that's Sheepy's Loch. And for your bairns to be safe for the Green Iron Wife, they've to be swimming in Sheepy's Loch. Now, Sheepy's Loch, the water never gets any higher than knee deep. It's usually warmer than the open water. And there's not actually that much seaweed, it's open sand, apart from the bits that are attached to the rock. You know. And further up the rocks of Sheepy's Loch, towards Dead Man's Gully, there is a big rock pool. It's not so big now I'm a grown-up, but I learned to swim in a rock pool. I learned to swim in that rock pool. It's a triangular shape, because obviously it's been sedimentary rock and one bit fell off and left you with an L shape, and then as it's settled over the centuries, it's become a V. It's about 5 foot long and about 3 foot wide. And when it's not been filled up with sand, when the water's been crazy and throwing the sand in, when it's the bare rock, it's like 1.5 feet deep. And it was always the warmest bit of water you have ever been in Scotland, apart from your own bath at home. And that's where I learned to swim. I learned to swim in one of the rock pools. Coming out of Sheepy's Loch into the open water side at East Beach, there's a rock that's it's visible, it's completely on its own, and it pops up above the water and disappears below it at a high tide. But when you're coming down the side, you just come past Sheepy's Loch and you hit the rock face that creates Sheepy's Loch. About level with that, There was one single rock which, when I was little, would have been waist high to an adult. Now it's only about knee high because, of course, the sand levels change with coastal erosion and stuff. And the way the fluid dynamics works, when it hits the rock, you'll have the build-up of sand on the side it hits, and as it comes over the rock and crashes, it digs a hole. So the side nearest the shallow end, the side nearest the beach, is the deepest bit of the pool when it's a pool that's been formed around a big rock. That was another one that I used to swim in, and that was nearly waist deep at times when I was little. But the last time I was there, it wasn't even knee deep. So it's weird when you go back to beaches like 20 years later and see all the things that's changed. I mean, there was a big hole in the sand dunes called Big Ben when I was little. Now, when I was little, Big Ben had a big boulder in the bottom, which was completely square. It was volcanic rock with a little bit of sand, well, mostly sandstone with little bits of volcanic rock in it, because there was like black glass chunks in it, and it was square. When I was little and we used to go to the beach with Mum and Dad, when you're not even like 7, that rock was about maybe a foot above the sand level. By the time I was going as a teenager, that rock had disappeared, and Big Ben had gone like this from the beach to more like, well, it had gone from having steep sides to like this when I was a teenager. And the last time I was there, about 3-4 years ago, the last time I was there, Big Ben was almost gone. With the wind, the water, I mean, the height of that sand dune, it's going to be the wind. The water never ever got into Big Ben. Never. Not for a very long time, anyway. I have seen it once where the spring tide was like washing the entrance of the sand dunes at Hopeman. It was literally like half an inch between the water and the entrance to the sand dunes, but I've only ever seen it like that once. Which is probably the same year I saw the harbour empty, like it was the other week. Somebody put photos up of the harbour the other day and it was completely empty. It did it once before when I was little, and you could walk all the way around the internal walls of Hopeman Harbour without getting your hips wet. The deepest bit of water was only knee deep. And it did it again this year. Well, this week, last week. There's photos in the Hopeman folk group if you're in that. And a few people have shared it too. But it's amazing. I mean, you don't realise what's happening at your beach when you're there all the time. But if you don't go for a few years and then you go back and you see the differences, it's like, wow. But yeah, the whole thing of the Gridiron Wife, I can't find anything that could possibly pinpoint her to an actual historical character to have actually existed. Because Hopeman's only 200 and a bit years old. And the way the Gridiron Wife is put across in the stories, she reads as late 1700s, early 1800s, which is right back at the beginning of the founding of Hopeman Village. Yes, a couple of the houses are older than that, but literally a couple. So I think it was more like a parable to keep your kids in the shallow end of the beach. If they're in Sheepy's Loch, the tide can't take them. Because in Sheepy's Loch, the currents don't come in. The water doesn't get high enough in Sheepy's Loch for the currents to take effect unless it's in high tide, and nobody's in Sheepy's Loch at high tide because it's open water. So it's the only thing I can think of. The Gridiron Wife is just a parable to get you to keep your bearings in Sheepy's Loch, where the water's shallower, warmer and safer. And on that note, the best piece of advice I can give you for a beach, anywhere, don't ever trust the ocean. Humans plus Mother Nature. Yeah, Mother Nature always wins. And anybody who disagrees with that remark might want to look at the reason we're all sitting at home at the moment. Mother Nature has spoken, and we're all on house arrest. But the bonus is the orcas have come back in, up by Wick and such like. The dolphins have been spotted off Hopeman, so you might be lucky if you live near the water in the Moray Firth. You might be lucky and spot the dolphins. If you've got a fantastic set of binocs, you might spot the orcas at some point over the next couple of weeks, because usually when you start seeing them up around the northern end of the bay, they do filter down over the following couple of weeks because they're following the food, and the food follows the warmer waters. So if you live near the coast, dig the binocs out. When the tide's due to change, be looking. Because it used to be that as the tide goes out, you'd see the dolphins coming out for Inverness direction out towards here. And in the evening, as the tide went back in, you'd see the dolphins going back in. I don't know if it's tidal or if it's the light, but it used to be like 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning and 8:30 to 10:30 at night that you would see the dolphins passing across the front of Hopeman and Birkhead. Used to be. Mind, I've been in town 15 years. A lot can change in 15 years, including the habits of the local dolphins. But we have seen photos on Facebook in the last week of the orcas and the dolphins. So if you live near the water, get your binoculars out and start looking for them. I don't know if I'm allowed to do anything about the military bases. I'll need to look into that. Mind you, I suppose I would only really be pulling stuff out of public domain. So if it's in the public domain, technically I am allowed to do that. I have one that ties in. When we do Kinloss Abbey, there's one person who connects Findhorn, Kinloss Abbey, a Russian princess, and British Aerospace. One person connects all of them into a nice neat package, which was why I was so gutted I wasn't fit to do it last night. But we have it there. And I'll tell you all about it when we do the Kinloss Abbey one, because that's where he's buried. I'll see if I can string together something on the caves, because I've been in almost all of the caves between Hopeman and Lossy. So I'll see if I can script something together and see if I can find some images online to show you, and if I can find that image of the wifey sitting outside our cave house with the pot-bellied stove and the bearings. I'll see what I can find. I will add it onto the request list, but I'm not putting anything into May until we see what happens if they're changing the rules on the 17th or not. Because if they're changing the rules, I will be booking in more of these. Well, if they're not changing the rules, I'll be booking in more of these. If they are changing the rules, we can get back onto our normal life again. But we'll see what happens. But I'll add it onto the list. Right, I will leave it there for now. Have a good night, whatever you're up to. Be safe. Take care of you and yours. And I'll see you when I see you. Bye.